Hi, and welcome to the short presentation on how to become an health and safety training provider. My name is Ken Annandale, and Penny Jones and I started Intra some 12 years ago with the primary objective of assisting people like yourself become a health and safety training provider and or set up a health and safety training department. To start off with, I'd like to ask you to register by WhatsApping your name and email address to 082 499 6911. That's 082 499 6911, so that we can send you additional material and information regarding this business model. Let's get straight into it. We know that in South Africa, there's something like 16 million employees. Probably a large portion of that are self-employed people. However, all of them need to apply the Occupational Health and Safety Act to their businesses and or their lives. We know that the legislation says that these people must be made conversant with the dangers, hazards, and risks attached to the work that they have to perform. And it's based on that that we suggest that you become a health and safety compliance training provider. I'll explain it each step of the way. Now, we know that the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the regulations have been around for something like 30 years. And we also know that this legislation is criminal legislation, which means essentially that if an employer or an employee fails to comply with the law, they could land up with a criminal record and, heaven forbid, actually land up with fines and or imprisonment. Now, I'm going to unpack just one or two of these sections for you so that you understand the severity of it. First and foremost, Section 8 is the employer's duties, and it says that the employer shall establish the dangers, hazards, and risks attached to the work performed, article or substances produced, used, handled, stored, transported, or any plant or machinery that's used. It carries on to say that once that's been done, they must identify and create the precautionary measures that need to be taken to provide the necessary means to apply such measures. And then, once that's been done, those precautionary measures need to be conveyed to the people in terms of information sessions, instruction sessions, training sessions, and under the supervision of somebody that will be watching them as they work. Now, we know that Section 13 continues this theme, and it says here, as far as reasonably practicable, every employer shall cause every employee to be made conversant with the hazards to his or her health and safety attached to any work that they have to perform, any article or substance they have to use, process, use, handle, store, transport, any plant or machinery, and anything that they're required to do, as well as those precautionary measures that we touched on. So having said that, we know that the next step for the employer is to do a HIRA. Now, a HIRA is hazard identification and risk assessment. Now, if you look at your organization, you're probably going to come across a lot of these dangers, hazards, and risks. I've listed about 150 of them over here. Not all of them would apply to you and your organization, but many of them would. And that is the basis for all occupational health and safety training in South Africa. We see that this list continues, and there are numerous dangers, hazards, and risks which need to be dealt with. Precautionary measures need to be written, and then information, instruction, or training sessions need to be held. So from that point, we now have a profile, a risk profile that the employee is exposed to or that the employer has on their premises. Now, of course, I mentioned to you that this is criminal legislation, and we know for a fact that if somebody fails to comply with this legislation, you could, as it says there, be guilty of an offense and on conviction, be liable to a fine not exceeding 50,000 Rand or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 1 year or both. Now, you can see this is really serious legislation. Now, having said that, our recommendation is then, first and foremost, because the law stands higher than anything else in terms of protocols and methodologies when it comes to training. First and foremost, we say focus on compliance training, legal compliance training. And to that end, Penny and I created a business model similar to a franchise, although it's not a franchise, we call it a license. And I will unpack the elements of this license as we go through the presentation. We also have a document called the prospectus, which I'm going to suggest that you acquire a copy of, and you will then be in a position where you can take this document to your attorney or your accountant, sit with them, and then make recommendations or ask them for their recommendations. Now, we have a lighter version of the license called a starter license. The other license is called the prime license. Now, the starter license does not include those elements in white, and I'll explain why as we go along. And the idea of a starter license is so that you can upgrade to prime at some stage. It's one step at a time. So Let's just quickly look at the starter license, and you'll see that it is ideal for training providers that want to go to Prime, but aren't ready for it yet. It enables them to select any 6 of our original training programs. One trainer from the organization is able to attend any 6 of our e-learning programs from a content orientation point of view. We also allow for the reselling of our e-learn courses to earn additional income. We have a 2-day online train the trainer program that the starter licensee would be encouraged to go through. We give you the right to co-brand and use our logo. We give you the right to modify the material. We give you the right to reproduce unlimited copies of the learner material, but not the facilitator guide. You'll notice that as we go through the presentation that the starter upfront fee can be deducted from the Prime upfront fee. And for this license, there is no monthly subscription fee. So having said that, let's move on and we'll have a look at the next license. The next license is the Prime license. And essentially what it is, it includes all of the elements in the starter license, plus all the training material that we have in our document Annexure A and Annexure C. Of course, if and when published, you'll receive any new or updated material. You can send 2 trainers on the e-learning programs, of which there are 14 programs. The intention is to familiarize themselves with the course content, and of course they have the topic of health and safety. For those that complete all 14, they will receive the HAZMAN certificate, the Health and Safety Management Certificate. They'll also be allowed or permitted to attend our QCTO accreditation do-it-yourself workshops, which comprises of 6 sessions. We have a 2-day online train the trainer program that I mentioned previously, and they and anyone else in your organization can attend that at no extra cost. We hold regular Zoom sessions for business and training material familiarization. We have a staggered payment system for those of you that are a little cash flow constrained. And in this instance, for the Prime, you'll notice that there is a monthly subscription fee, which does apply. Now, something that does not apply for the Prime license is the right to copy the facilitator material. That right is only granted to our corporate licenses. More about that in the document. So let's quickly talk about the costings. The starter license, which is on special at the moment, is 15,500 Rand, excluding VAT. The Prime license is 49,500 Rand, excluding VAT. But if you happen to be a corporate with multi-branches, we will negotiate a rate for you so that it is relative to the amount of employees and branches that you've got. Then the monthly subscription fee for Prime and corporate is 1,500 Rand per month. However, if you're in a corporate organization, what you can do is you can negotiate an annual fee that's paid once off per year. And then lastly, if and when you feel like you're ready to set up your own e-learning program, we will make the training material that we've got on our e-learning platform available to you for a fee. So having said that, please note that VAT is not included in any of these prices. And of course, we're open to negotiation when it comes to things like upfront fees paid for subscription fees and so forth. All right. Now, in the world of occupational health and safety, you're going to find that there's a lot of misinformation, an enormous amount of disinformation, misinformation, misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and so forth. And you're going to come across these words such as competency and compliance, and accreditation and alignment and approval, and certification and registration and so forth. And that will mean that you will literally be scratching your head as to say, what are these things? Now, that's part of the process. We will teach you step by step, item for item, so that you have a better understanding of how the process works. Competency is a very important one. In the previous slide, I mentioned it twice. And the reason for that is that the legislation does require competency in a handful of instances. And when I say a handful, we'll point them out to you. That's not a lot, but there are a couple of places where competency is required. But generally speaking, you would be doing occupational health and safety training in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act as governed by the Department of Labor. Okay, so having said that, once you become a licensee, we'll put you through an orientation process. We have an operations manual for that, and the orientation session takes place once a month on a Saturday for about 4 hours, during which time you and anyone from your team can attend the Zoom function, and we will discuss processes such course content or changes to the legislation, changes to the process from SETA to QCTO accreditation. We'll be talking about things like sales and marketing and advertising and promotions and things of that nature. So this is a very, very valuable session, especially for those of you that have not been in business in the past. Now, I said to you that we'll talk about competency, and we can see that in some regulations, competency is measured, such as the asbestos regulation, asbestos abatement, commercial diving, ergonomics risk assessors in the ergonomics regulation, first aid, hazardous biological agents, lifting machinery in the driven machinery regulations, major hazard installation regulations, and then, of course, in terms of the new explosive regulations, the roles and responsibilities, working at heights in terms of construction regulation, and so forth. Now, we often talk about compliance versus competency, or compliance versus credit-bearing training. And I just want to point out to you, in these places where the regulations talk about it, you'll see that sometimes there is no governing body, no other than the Department of Employment and Labor, no SACWA, no SETA, no QCTO, no NQF. And this is a good example. In the ergonomics regulation, it mentions training more than 10 times. And it says the following, which I think is fantastic. It means that there's a wonderful market out there should you wish to run ergonomics training programs. It says that all employees, all mandatories, and all persons other than employees must receive training prior to their placement, and the employer must conduct refresher training. Now, purely from a business point of view, that is wonderful. It means that you will be able to develop a client for life, and your client will have you come back again and again and again and again. Now, I mentioned that for ergonomics, there was never a unit standard for employees. There was one for ergonomic risk assessors. And at this stage, QCTO has not developed any curriculum or codes for ergonomics. Well, let's watch that space. I'm sure it's about to come. So what we do is we provide you with all the training material, and you are then able to do compliance training. And the ergonomic training material comes with facilitator guides, learner guides, PowerPoints, comes with course material, and things of that nature. Now, another example of the training material that we have, we know that the legislation says that all employees must be made familiar. So we have an induction program here, which is video-based. It comes with those various documents that I spoke about. And this is a particularly well-researched program, which you can then customize. And in doing that, you would then be able to run courses that are specific to your client's risk profile. Okay, so having said that, then let's talk about the Train the Trainer. This Train the Trainer program that we run is not a credit-bearing training program. It is truly a dynamic program based on my 30 years of experience in business in the health and safety training world. The next one is going to take place on the 14th and 25th of September, 2 days, and we're going to invite you and your entire team to come along. The last one we had about 15 people that attended, and the reviews were really remarkable. Now, for those of you that are setting yourself up in business for the very first time, our marketing manager, Natalie, will provide you with insight into how to do your online marketing. She has a degree from UCT in media, has worked for a number of advertising agencies, and she will then audit your existing marketing strategy and assist you by setting up certain elements so that you can be found in the internet. Now, this does not include setting up of a website. And that's why I mentioned to you that we've got that document called the prospectus, which we can strongly urge you to read. Okay, then of course, I've already touched on it, but we've got an e-learning platform that consists of 15 different programs. And we use the e-learning program for two reasons. One of which is that you can generate income by selling membership or participation in the program, as well as we use the e-learning program to orientate non-familiar trainers or facilitators in the subject that they're going to be providing information or instruction or training in. Now, this is an important part. What INTRA have done over the years is we've developed a range of training programs that are compliance orientated. We call them our original training materials, and they are compliance orientated and cover these topics. When you receive the prospectus, you'll receive a complete comprehensive list of all the programs that we've got. And you can see, just looking at that screen, we've got programs such, we call it the AS track, the asbest track, the claim track, the dangerous goods by roads workshop called DANGO, Electrack, EnviroTrack, ErgoTrack, Fall Track, Fire Track, First Track, HAZRIP, and so forth and so forth. And we'll provide you with a comprehensive list in the prospectus. We then say that you, after having gone through an orientation process, familiarized yourself with the training material, done whatever customization or adaptation you require, you'd then be able to run the program and, of course, issue a certificate. Now, you can call it whatever you want to, except you may not call it a certificate of competency. That is at the behest of the QCTO. So, having said that, you would be in a position authorized to run training programs for and on behalf of employers. Because remember, Section 8 says the employer shall train. So the employer can appoint somebody like yourself to do the training for them. Okay, so now we're looking at occupational health and safety training, and we see that there are a host of places in the legislation. We'll point them out to you in the orientation sessions as to what and where and when training is required, and how to interpret certain sections of the law so that you can come up with a list of all the dangers, hazards, and risks that your employees need to be faced with. However, we also know that over the last 10 years or so, there's been a great deal of emphasis from SACWA on SETA accredited training program, and more recently on QCTO accredited training programs. We'll take you through the process, but I do want to say this. It is not compulsory that you do a SACWA, SETA, QCTO credit-bearing course in 95% of all instances. You may, in fact, run those information sessions like the old toolbox talks, or instruction sessions, or of course, training according to the requirements of the law. So I need to just caution you, be aware of the fact that we're in a situation where the legislation says one thing and the marketplace says another. And the marketplace demands accreditation, and yet the legislation does not. We'll teach you how to get around that. And that's one of the things that we need to talk about when we get to the orientation sessions. Now, we know that we got notification some time ago where they said that they were going to phase out SETA and then phase in QCTO. And we heard that as of June last year, that they said to us that all the unit standards would expire. They then extended that to a degree and they said June of this year. Now, June has come and gone. So we know that 11,000 unit standards or thereabouts all expired. However, we know as a result of the pushback, some of these unit standards have been extended. We also know this is true of some of the QCTO qualifications, which have also been extended, but we do know that no new unit standards will be developed. Then, as far as accreditation is concerned, we know that only those who are current as SETA SDPs, skills development providers, are regarded as accredited. If your accreditation has expired, regrettably, you would have to go for QCTO accreditation. So they've given us an extension on this until 2026. Now, having said that, there will be no new accreditations from SETA and no renewals from SETA, to the best of our knowledge at this stage. Now, other than the QCTO's first aid programs, of which there are 3, we've also not seen any new QCTO occupational health and safety skills programs, and no accreditation is available for anything other than first aid, which we'll definitely help you with. And now, the last thing that I'll just mention is that QCTO no longer speaks of unit standards. They speak of codes, more on at a later stage. Now, here are the programs they've got material for. These are all QCTO-aligned training materials, and you'll see that the first 3 first aid programs, the basic and the intermediate, we've got the training material for. The advanced, we're still busy developing that training material. Now, here's a little bit of information for you, that the QCTO and HWCETA have a work group, and Penny and I are and have been part of that work group for some time, Penny more so than myself. And we know that they're working towards getting additional skills program codes and curriculum written. We were told that this would be ready by September. Now, September is just around the corner, so here's holding thumbs. Okay, so having said that, then what do we do? Well, added to that list of the training programs that we spoke about previously, we have another 40 or so formerly SACWA unit standard line programs, which you can still use. Nothing stopping you from using them. However, you won't be able to issue a certificate of competency. Alrighty. So there we go. We'll provide you with a lot of training material that you can move ahead. Now, if you want to find out whether the unit standards that you've been using in the past, if you were previously accredited or are accredited, you can go onto this website and you can do a search. It's part of the SACWA website, and you can do a search. You take the unit standard number, pop it into that search engine, and it'll tell you whether the unit standard has been extended or not. This is a very important aspect, a bit of research that you need to do. Now, moving on from there, let's say you're at a stage where you say, right, my accreditation has expired, or I need accreditation from the QCTO as of scratch. So I've never done this before. This is something new. So you'll meet Penny and she will take you through it's actually 12 individual workshops over 6 days. On a Friday, she will host these programs for you so that you and anybody in your team will learn how to do your own accreditation. Now, to kick that off, we've got a pack called the Accredi Kit, and Penny developed this Accredi Kit, and it comprises of all the documentation. And as she says, to get your docs in a row, not ducks in a row, but to get your docs in a row. She'll also take you through this via Zoom, and the Zoom sessions are interactive and highly beneficial, and you'll get to network with other people who are learning to do exactly the same thing. So the accreditation workshop is incredibly valuable. Now, there's a good reason for that, because the accreditation process and re-accreditation process with QCTO is somewhat different to SETA. It's very important that you note that. And we also know that in the past it was very expensive to get SETA accreditation. This way, you are empowered and you can do it. All of this you can do for yourself. Okay. So having said that, we also know that training is expensive, and competency training more so. I just created this little path to show you all the steps or places that you've got to go to get a learner competent and to ensure that your employers are compliant. We'll talk a lot about this, but this is one of the reasons that we say focus on legal compliance in the beginning. It's a lot less administratively demanding, and it's a lot cheaper, and you don't have to lay out money for all kinds of additional people on your team that will be doing certain things which don't necessarily add to your bottom line, but take away from your bottom line. So having said that, we'll talk about that a lot. And then as we start wrapping up the presentation, we host workshops and we host talks on Zoom on a regular basis. We have a YouTube channel. We encourage you to go onto the YouTube channel and you can go and watch some of the videos that we've got there. And there are recordings of other Zoom functions. Also, we have a private Zoom YouTube channel, which is only accessible to our licensees. Right. So having said that, now here is a wonderful opportunity. We have over 220 licensees from Cape Town to Cairo, and you would then be introduced to them as and when you require, and you can then collaborate with them so that they can do certain things which you might not be ready for. For instance, if you want to run a Working at Heights course, we'll have somebody that in your area, geographical area, whether in South Africa or maybe beyond the borders of South Africa, who'll be able to do the training for you. And the same applies to first aid and so forth. So we're going to invite you to take advantage of the networking opportunities that are there. Now, having said that, so we've got all the occupational health and safety requirements. We see it legislated. We also know, on the other hand, we've got the QCTO, and you can see that they've encountered a number of stumbling blocks. This journey is taking far too long, and they're having to backtrack on some of their previous decisions. So what would the reasonable man do? And you know that statement in terms of the legislation, the reasonable man. Known in Latin, it's the diligent father of the family, or diligens pater familias. What would the reasonable man do? The reasonable man would comply with the law and not, as they say in the classics, get their knickers in a knot because it's not accredited, other than where the legislation demands that be accredited. And you saw there are a couple of places which would apply to you. So we say in closing, focus on compliance, focus on helping your employer comply, focus on training the employee so that ultimately you keep your client out of court and you keep your employee or learner out of hospital. And that's the objective. So if you're interested in becoming a training provider, WhatsApp the word quote to 082 499 6911, 082 499 6911, and Natalie will get back to you and she'll provide you with a lot more information. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop the recording now, and feel free to reach out to us, set up a one-on-one Zoom meeting so that we can chat to you and your team. If you'd like a presentation of this nature to your management team, let Natalie know, and she will then set it up, and we can spend some time with you and your team, your management team, and your partners, and so forth. So with that, you can go onto our website, which is www.safetytraininglicense.com, and there'll be a lot more information for you. Look forward to hearing from you. All the best then. Bye for now.